I was told that we've had over 1,000 people sign up for this session online. So I just want to take a moment to really connect our communities, both, everyone in this room, as well as everyone joining this conversation online. I think it's really special, and I think it really shows the commitment to this conversation about accountability. I'm Subha Wijesiriwardena. I work with CREA. We are a civil society lead on the Action Coalition for Feminist Movements and Leadership. And we're a global feminist human rights organization led by feminists in the Global South. And I will be your moderator for this session as we reflect collectively on 1 year of accountability and progress on the generation equality journey. Just over a year ago at the 2021 Generation Equality Forum in Mexico and Paris, diverse stakeholders made over 1,000 policy, program, and financial commitments to accelerate progress on gender equality over the next 5 years. Since then, generation equality has sustained its momentum with a lot of hard work, with the number of commitments across its 6 coalitions more than doubling. But the events in Mexico City and Paris were just one aspect of this multi-year action-filled journey. This process has yielded huge lessons for everyone involved, and we, and I think I can speak for civil society, have sought and received input and interest from a range of actors, including from movements who are directly impacted by GEF commitments, who all share in the idea that accountability has to be central to this endeavor. Now, leaders and allies are working together to ensure full implementation and accountability for all the commitments made, to secure transformative new commitments where they are most needed, and to continue energizing global cross-sector strategies to advance equality and rights. A year after the forum, this is a moment for us to re-energize our efforts together, as well as to launch a formal process of accountability, to reflect on what we've already achieved and accomplished, and what we need to do differently and better. We will hear from the UN and UN Women leadership about the critical need to step up our accountability efforts to sustain momentum towards our vision at a critical moment for women's rights and gender equality. We will also hear, importantly, preliminary findings from the Generation Equality First Accountability Report. And we will be in dialogue with leaders and commitment makers to hear about the progress that they've made in the past year, to reflect on how we strengthen and energize our collective efforts moving forward. We encourage folks online to please use the Q&A feature throughout the event, and the questions will then be addressed by the Generation Equality team. And with that, I'm delighted to welcome some remarks from UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed to open this moment. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to add my voice at a critical point in the trajectory of generation equality. This first accountability moment is key, not only because the world's cascading crises have hit women hardest, but because next year the international community will take stock of where we are on Agenda 2030 at the SDG Summit. This event is an important stepping stone. It gives us an opportunity to reflect, assess progress, and refocus our attention and efforts towards an equal and just society for all. The latest Gender and SDG snapshot gave us a sense of the magnitude of the work ahead. At the current rate, it may take us close to 300 years to achieve the full gender equality, close gaps in legal protection, and remove discriminatory laws. 140 years for women to be represented equally in positions of power and leadership in the workplace, and at least 40 years to achieve equal representation in national parliaments. But we also have some reasons for hope. 1 year ago, the Secretary General and world leaders gathered in Paris for a remarkable and historic moment for gender equality, a moment which gathered a diverse set of stakeholders from all sectors of society to turn commitments into action. away from scarcity and towards resourcing, away from approaches that have limited progress and towards a transformative path for realizing gender equality and advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. It is an approach that mirrors the Secretary-General's vision in our common agenda. Actors from every sector working together to advance a more equal society, bringing energy, dynamism, new ideas, new resources, and a powerful spirit of collaboration with youth and civil society at the center. A display of strengthened multilateralism in action for the 2030 Agenda. That bold new spirit is what makes the promise of generation equality so great. It is our moment to re-energize collective action and momentum for gender equality. I thank you for the commitments made at last year's Generation Equality Forum and the many made since then. It is now time to honor those commitments, to expand them, and to report back with transparency and accountability. The promise of generation equality depends on collective accountability from all, as well as mutual support to plug gaps, share resources, and fuel new ideas. The Secretary-General and I are with you and will be your allies, champions, and partners in realizing your bold and ambitious vision for success. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to
Next, we are happy to be joined today by the Executive Director of UN Women, Sima Bahous.
Welcome to UN Women. I thank the Deputy Secretary General for her remarks and for being such a steadfast and passionate champion for generation equality. Generation equality is our bold collective promise to the worlds of women and girls. If we succeed, generation equality will accelerate the world's progress on the Sustainable Development Goals and transform lives for generations to come. And we must succeed. Our ambition is urgent. Women and girls continue to face the aftershocks of the pandemic. And all over the world, we see rising threats to women's rights. UN Women data shows that at the current rate of progress, it may take close to 300 years to achieve full gender equality. And I don't think that any one of us here today or listening to us or in the world around us will want to wait another 300 years. As we gather today, just over a year since the Generation Equality Forum in Mexico City and Paris, I am here to tell you that we must take stronger action to ensure that the promises of generation equality are kept. As Executive Director of UN Women, that commitment to stronger action for generation equality is my foremost priority. So I am delighted to announce today that I have new partners in that commitment who will energize our next phase through their participation in an advisory multi-stakeholder leadership group. They are the governments of Tanzania, the United States, South Africa, Sweden, and Georgia, as well as ex officio, the governments of France and Mexico. For philanthropy, the Gates Foundation and the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. UN and international organizations, UNFPA, the Interparliamentary Union, and the International Telecommunications Union. Civil society, the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling, Asamblea Nacional y Política de Mujeres, Shifting the Power Coalition, Global Fund for Women, and Initiative for Gender Equality and Sexual Reproductive Health. From youth organizations, the YP Foundation and Fridays for Futures. From adolescent girls organizations, ASODI, Women's Association for Rural Development and Peace, and Amplify Girls. Other members are being confirmed and announcements will follow soon. Their collective leadership will be crucial. Excellencies, now is the time to keep pushing to sustain and increase our momentum. Generation equality was not and is not a one-off event. It is a sustained journey, a journey that must be underpinned by accountability, delivery, and results. So where do we stand today on generation equality? I want to acknowledge that strong initial progress has been made. Together, we have more than doubled the number of generation equality commitments since Paris, from 1,000 then to over 2,500 today. And as the first accountability report findings today will demonstrate, there is positive progress. Commitments are being implemented and large numbers of new partnerships are being energized. This month, I have seen much evidence of all your sustained progress and support at our executive board and throughout my meetings this UNGA high-level week with heads of states and ministers. The seeds that were planted in Mexico City and in Paris are starting to flourish all over the world. Yet, we need to do far more to ensure that the promises of generation equality are kept. Firstly, we need to raise our game on reporting and accountability. So far, we have data on just 31% of commitments. We are grateful for those responses, but it is not enough. We need the full picture to achieve accountability and to drive momentum. The missing data is what will show where we are on track and where we are failing behind. I call on every commitment maker to fulfill their commitment on reporting. Secondly, we must do more to grow resources for existing and new generation equality commitments. We know that so many actors committed to the vision of generation equality need more resources to meet and expand commitments or drive new ones. This is especially the case to fund the bold commitments of youth and feminist movements. We must not allow women's rights to continue to be let down by underinvestment and lack of funding. We must not. Thirdly, we all need to expand the generation equality. Securing the promise of generation equality compels us to expand our commitments, extend our geographic reach, and catalyze new transformative commitments. There is so much more work still to be done. The 2023 Generation Equality Forum in New York, at the midpoint of our generation equality journey and the halfway mark of the SDGs. Co-timed with the SDG Summit, this will be a critical moment to bring together these three imperatives: to ensure accountability, to mobilize resources, and to energize new commitments in the urgent context of SDG acceleration. Ladies and gentlemen, my call to all of you today, as we look towards the 2023 Generation Equality Forum, is that you double down. Double down on your accountability and reporting. Double down on what you can do to energize resources, particularly towards the work of civil society and youth, and double down to make a meaningful and lasting impact. You have my personal leadership commitment to strengthening UN Women's convening role to support your collective vision and work. In 1 year's time, at the Generation Equality Forum in New York, I want us all to stand here together with pride, with evidence of success, with powerful stories of impact, and with the vast majority of commitment makers fully reporting, and with the confidence, dynamism, and collective power that comes from knowing that SDG 5, the Beijing Platform for Action, and our collective promises are in our sights and in our grasp. Together, we have created an unprecedented opportunity. Let us reach forward together to realize that promise. I thank you.
Thank you so much for those motivating remarks for everyone to double down, start reporting. Please listen. It's a very important message. And we'd now like to welcome His Excellency Minister Ebrard from the Government of Mexico, one of the pioneers of generation equality as a former forum co-host. an Action Coalition leader, and ex officio member of the newly launched Multi-Stakeholder Leadership Group. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Dear Sima Bahous and dear colleague Catherine Colonna. I'm going to explain briefly in English, and then if I can translate to Spanish in order to the audience that is following this in Mexico right now. So 3 years ago, we presented in the General Assembly of the United Nations the Feminist Foreign Policy of Mexico. And accordingly, we promote the Generation Equality Forum along with France partners. We were in Paris and we organized a forum in Mexico City. One of the most important conclusions in Mexico City Forum was about founding the empowerment of women in our economy and society. In our country and several countries, it's very difficult to obtain financial resources to start little companies or initiatives or projects for everyone, but especially for women. It's very difficult to have access to strengthen the capacities to participate in the economy or in the society. We have a very complex regulatory standards, so you need to know how to do it, not only to have the project, the initiative, and the money, but to know how to deal with this regulatory framework, which is very complex. So was one of the conclusions or most important conclusions in Mexico City. So right now, we want to share with you that we are going to launch at once a new fund called ELLAS, which is going to be managed by United Nations. It's going to have $50 million for Latin American and Caribbean basin, starting in Mexico. We are putting the first money required for this new fund. And this fund is going to work on these three objectives, which was in the first place to strengthen the capacities, to reduce inequalities. Secondly, to put the first capital for new initiatives or little companies. And third, to really support and empower the women ideas and initiatives, providing the regulatory knowledge necessary to start to work. We think that is the better way to really make a contribution and follow the conclusions of the forum, to provide those resources and then increase the resources in order to support the initiatives from women in our society. I'm turning to Spanish. Estamos anunciando el día de hoy el lanzamiento de un fondo. El fondo se va a llamar ELLAS. Oh. I have two translations. Decía yo que vamos a lanzar este fondo que se va a llamar ELLAS. Y no, doesn't work. Bueno, lo digo brevemente. Lanzamos un nuevo fondo que se llama ELLAS para apoyar a las mujeres en sus primeras iniciativas económicas o sociales, ampliar su empoderamiento y su capacidad de participar en nuestra sociedad y en la economía. Así que en México, de acuerdo a las conclusiones del Foro Generación de Igualdad que tuvimos en México y en el que participamos en París, apoya la creación de este fondo que se llama ELLAS, empieza a trabajar cuanto antes y la meta que tenemos son $50 millones para la región México, Latinoamérica y el Caribe. Vamos a estar informando seguramente el año que entra, 2023, los logros y los aprendizajes que tengamos con este fondo, que es una aportación para lo que nos ha llamado la señora Sima Bahous. Necesitamos recursos para esto. Necesitamos financiar el cambio en la sociedad, no solo que esté en el ámbito normativo o declarativo. Y de eso se trata el día de hoy, por eso me interesaba mucho estar con usted. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for providing the excellent translation both ways as well. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Minister Catherine Colonna on behalf of the Government of France. That has similarly been really important, leading the way on generation equality since its inception as a former forum co-host, an action coalition leader, and also ex officio member of the Multi-Stakeholder Leadership Group. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you. You got my name all right. Thank you so much for that. We've been trying a few times. We had a repetition. Dear ministers, dear Marcelo, Madam, chère Sima Bahous, ladies and gentlemen, because we need both of you, dear friends, if you want to hear another beautiful language, i.e. French, now is the time. I know those online have a translation, others in the room will catch up or guess what I'm going to say in supporting the forum. No big surprise. So let's go. C'est un très grand plaisir pour moi, mais vraiment. Un an après l'organisation en juin 2021 du Forum Génération Égalité à Paris, avec le Mexique et sous l'égide d'ONU Femmes, de pouvoir dresser très rapidement un premier bilan, un point d'étape, hein, donc, afin de poursuivre notre mobilisation en faveur du droit des femmes et des filles, qui est en France grande cause nationale des 2 mandats du président de la République et qui est dans le monde entier, pour chacun de nos pays, un enjeu de justice, de progrès et de développement. Pourquoi devons-nous renforcer encore et sans relâche notre mobilisation? Je vais citer Simone de Beauvoir, il le faut. Elle écrivait ceci: « Il suffit d'une crise politique, économique ou religieuse pour que les droits des femmes soient remis en question. » C'était il y a quelques décennies qu'elle écrivait cela, et malheureusement, nous voyons combien c'est d'actualité aujourd'hui. Parce que voyons les choses en face. Alors que le monde traverse une série de conflits, de crises, le danger d'une régression des droits des femmes et des filles est de plus en plus réel. Et il est perceptible partout, même dans nos pays ou dans des pays proches, vous le savez bien, comme le risque d'une hausse des discriminations et des violences sexuelles et racistes, qui non seulement ne diminuent pas, hein, mais parfois augmentent. Alors, depuis des décennies, nous avons réalisé des progrès. Je ne veux pas être négative, mais on voit que ces progrès sont aujourd'hui menacés par une sorte de contre-offensive conservatrice, populiste, sur tous les continents. Et cette contre-offensive, elle vise en particulier, pas seulement, mais en particulier, les droits de santé sexuelle et reproductifs, notamment le droit à l'avortement. Nous nous exprimons dans un pays qui, hélas, connaît un réel recul à cet égard. Alors, c'est dans ces moments de crise que nous devons faire avancer collectivement les droits des femmes et des filles. Le Forum Génération Égalité en est la parfaite illustration. Quelques mois après ce soi-disant consensus de Genève, qui n'en était pas un, par lequel les signataires prétendaient remettre en cause des décennies de combat des femmes pour la liberté de disposer de leur corps. Le forum a permis de mobiliser plus de 40 milliards de dollars de financement inédit et de formuler 1000 engagements. Aujourd'hui, ce sont plus de 2700 engagements qui ont déjà été pris dans ce cadre par les acteurs publics, privés ou associatifs dans le monde entier. Mais il est de notre responsabilité de ne pas nous arrêter seulement aux engagements, aux promesses, et de les traduire en actes. C'est ce que nous appelons le multilatéralisme en actes. Alors bien sûr, commençons par nous-mêmes. Bien sûr, la France prendra toute sa part à cet effort. Elle a décidé de porter à 400 millions d'euros son soutien financier en faveur des droits de santé sexuelle et reproductifs et de la santé des femmes et des filles sur la période 2021-2025. Elle verse 18 millions d'euros au Fonds des Nations Unies pour la population en faveur de l'achat et de la distribution de moyens de contraception. Ça, c'est le chiffre de 2021. Je pense que nous ferons aussi bien cette année. Nous renouvelons notre contribution au Fonds français Muskoka, qui intervient en Afrique de l'Ouest et en Afrique centrale, à hauteur de 50 millions d'euros sur les 5 ans à venir, et contre les violences affectant les femmes, nous finançons à hauteur de 6 millions d'euros, 6,2 en réalité, 2020-2022, le Fonds mondial pour les survivantes de violences sexuelles liées au conflit, dont vous savez toute l'importance et le remarquable travail. Voilà, vous pouvez donc compter sur l'engagement solide et constant de la France pour faire avancer à vos côtés les droits des femmes et des filles. Et nous sommes fiers, chère madame, de rejoindre l'Alliance pour les mouvements féministes, comme vous l'avez rappelé, et de compter parmi les 9 États promouvant une diplomatie résolument féministe. Je ne veux pas prétendre en être l'incarnation, mais je dois vous donner une petite statistique qui concerne le ministère de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères. Il y a un ministre et puis 3 autres ministres ou secrétaires d'État, donc nous sommes 4. Et sur les 4, il y a 3 femmes. Donc c'est pas si mal, c'est un bon début. Voilà, soutenez-nous, merci.
Thank you so much for those resounding commitments to gender equality, to this journey, and in both very beautiful languages. There's no competition. Thank you so much. I think that brings this segment of the conversation to a close, and we'll be moving on to a quick panel next. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone got a chance to maybe quickly stretch your legs or whatever you need. And then we're moving on to a very exciting conversation about what's actually been happening. So we have 3 panelists here with us today, 2 in person and 1 online. I think a perfect reflection of the current global moment. And they've really been driving efforts to advance and strengthen accountability on generation equality. We welcome Papa Sek, Chief of the Research and Data Section at UN Women, supporting UN Women's role as custodian of the monitoring and accountability framework for generation equality. Papa is joined by Emilia Blancarte Jaber, who is the Global Advocacy and Accountability Lead at the Global Fund for Women, and Rosa Bransky, the co-founder and co-CEO at We Are Purposeful. Together, these 2 organizations are leading complementary feminist accountability processes to promote and safeguard the overall accountability of generation equality. If I could pose the first question to you, Papa, could you describe the role of UN Women and partners to uphold accountability for the commitments made through generation equality? What are some of the preliminary findings in the report, for example, and how can we learn based on what we have already?
Great. Thank you very much, Subha, and really a pleasure to join you all. So I will, as part of, to answer your question, I'll have just a short presentation to go over some of the really, I think, nice findings that we have in the report. So following from what our executive director said earlier, our ambition with generation equality is really to address the urgency of action for gender equality. And the accountability framework of generation equality really represents a shared sense of urgency to measure progress and also take swift actions to shift course as necessary. For the past year, we've hit several essential milestones, from soliciting commitments in 2021 to validating them in early 2022, then launching the commitment dashboard in March at CSW, and really in line with some of the key principles of transparency of generation equality, but also really to ensure that civil society especially could join in this call for action. Now at the General Assembly, we are launching the first accountability report and the online accountability platform as an initial step to hold commitment makers accountable for their promises and to transparently report on their work. This is an important building block as we look towards the midpoint moment in 2023. So the first accountability report really documents the substantial progress that has taken place through the action coalitions. The compact will report next year. First, I'd really like to pause by thanking all action coalition leaders and commitment makers for their reporting. It was a challenging process, but really I think we really recognize and appreciate their efforts. I would also like to just pause to say a special word of appreciation for my own team that led this work and really I think working tireless hours day and night to make this happen. But kudos also to the entire UN Women team that has contributed to it. I'm really excited to get the chance today to provide you with the first-hand insights of what we found through this report. As the global generation equality community, we have more than doubled the number of commitments to the Action Coalition since Paris, from 1,000 to over 2,500 today. This initial data in the report serves as a preliminary baseline of commitments delivery. We can confidently say that the data is representative across all thematic areas of the action coalitions and representing 808 commitments by 267 commitment makers. More have submitted responses since we paused the survey for data analysis in August. And we will be using that data to continue to update essentially the results in the report. And also as we look forward towards the midpoint next year. But as our executive director said earlier, still it's only a share of 31% of commitments that have responded. And we really need to do much more to ensure that accountability accountability ideas are respected. And so as a result, we will continue to make the survey available through the end of October to ensure that as many commitment makers as possible are able to submit their responses. And just to say, accountability is really a collective responsibility, and we've heard that already today. And for generation equality to be successful, commitment makers must really report transparently on their commitments. With this data at hand, we hope that leaders and commitment makers can use it and have an important role to advocate for more comprehensive reporting and commitments implementations, and also efforts to accelerate ahead of the 2023 midpoint next year. So now onto the data. This is my favorite topic. So just I think an important point is that the data that you will see here through the report is really representative of those that have reported. So it's 31% of all commitments. The data, statistically is representative, but it doesn't constitute the whole of the more than 2,500 commitments. But that said, the data really shows that reported commitments reflect a very strong alignment with generation equality blueprint targets. And that's really critical and this is important because it will help us also be able to connect commitments to actual progress, which we will start doing next year as part of the midpoint. Commitment makers are taking actions to deliver against their bold promises to accelerate progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. 80% of the reported commitments are being implemented, and 60% show clear evidence of progress, ranging from concrete outputs to quantified impact. These are really impressive findings, considering the challenges that were posed in the past year by the pandemic and the other systemic crises that we've seen. For example, and we showcase several examples in the report, the International Trade Center has launched the She Trades Initiative platform that really connects women-led businesses to economic opportunities. These have to date linked more than 41,000 users, women businesses through the platform. We're also seeing that generation equality has created a new drive with really, different partnerships. The data collected confirms that 15% of commitments are joint commitments, and 52% of these are the result of new partnerships that were formed as a result of generation equality. There are several examples of these partnerships. The Regional Alliance for the Digitization of Women in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is between Microsoft, MasterCard, UN Women, and EDIOS Global, addresses the digital skill gap by training women and girls. And at the heart of generation equality is really the resolve to accelerate progress on gender equality for all women and girls in all their diversity. We've seen through the report, through the survey, for instance, that 52% of reported commitments say that they intend to integrate an intersectional lens. And 48% of commitment makers say that they will work directly with women's rights, feminist, and grassroots organizations. These data show impressive intentions, and we will hopefully experience how they are translated into concrete action in the coming years. A word on the financials, and this is really, I think, an important point. Achieving the Global Acceleration Plan and the Sustainable Development Goals really depend on well-resourced gender actions. Also, here the news is really encouraging. Many commitment makers, unfortunately, generally opted not to disclose concrete financial information in the survey. However, those who did report financials in the survey confirmed that the largest commitments made in Paris have remained steadfast. In total, the financial policy program and advocacy commitments reported amounts to $24 billion. With more reporting, including from some of the largest commitment makers, we fully expect this amount to rise significantly, potentially even going above the 40 billion that was reported in Paris. We've had, since last year, a lot of questions about how much of this is new money and how much has actually been secured. The survey helped to answer those questions. Overall, the share of the 24 billion reported here that has been secured, it is estimated at least 17 billion or 71% of the total. And a minimum of 16.7 billion is reported as new money. Half of the 24 billion are financial commitments, and the other half are a mix of policy, programmatic, and advocacy commitments. And a total of 14% of reported commitments are expected to involve grants to organizations that are working on gender equality. This is really great and encouraging, but also the survey has surfaced some challenges that we really need to be aware of and that we need to address. Sven, your next slide, please. Global reach, for example, remains a significant concern due to the concentration in select regions. For example, we see significant underrepresentation in Asia Pacific and the Arab states, and along with Central and Southern Asia. Despite the strong financial picture that I talked about just now, there is still a gap between the 24 billion reported as commitments and what has been secured to date. So far, we've estimated that gap to be $5 billion, and that requires attention. And here, again, I think one of the challenges is that some action coalitions are more effective than others, such as the one on climate or technology, but also the Economic Justice Action Coalition. Finally, just to stress that the relatively low response rate to the survey is, will continue to be a challenge. And this is also, this is particularly true for financial commitments, where a majority of commitment makers actually, indicated that they couldn't disclose information because either they didn't have it or they couldn't do it because of internal policies. And that is something that we need to address going forward. So just, again, I think just to conclude, these findings are really evidence that generation equality is a sustained journey that must be underscored by accountability, transparency, and implementation. But the news are encouraging. And with this accountability framework, the dashboard and the survey, we really have a solid process in place that can be strengthened in the coming year. I hope that you will find the report and the data insightful and will use it to advocate for the changes that we all want to see. And also complementary to the monitoring efforts that are spearheaded by UN Women, civil society organizations are doing their part in designing complementary accountability processes that usher and offer new perspectives. It is my pleasure to have Emilia here and from Global Fund and Rosa from We Are Purposeful to really have a conversation about some of their complementary efforts to drive accountability mechanisms. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Papa. And I want to really actually express appreciation for, the tools actually that, as someone that has used them and I had to do the survey for my organization. I've used the dashboard in particular many times. It's been a process, and I think it's kind of incredible to see that, all this hard work has actually resulted in these quite concrete tools that are actually pretty user-friendly. And, and I know that there was a long process to get there and so much discussion about what would make it more friendly. And I think, as someone that has kind of interfaced with the tools, I have to say, just to appreciate the hard work of you and your team, but also everyone else who's sort of worked and thought about what those tools should look like. And from that, I'd like to move over to the second question, to Emilia and Rosa. Maybe Emilia, could you start us off? How will Global Fund, or how have you seen your role in driving accountability towards commitments, and what's the special role of these complementary processes?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here today speaking to you as advocacy and accountability lead at the Global Fund for Women. Just for context, we're a public foundation that supports gender justice movements to create meaningful change that will last beyond our lifetime. With regards to the specific Generation Equality Forum process, we're supporting a co-designed feminist accountability initiative by funding feminist organizations from across the world to hold power to account. Through a collective communications, data, and advocacy strategy, grassroots activists and feminist organizations will work to advocate for Generation Equality Forum commitment makers to deliver on their promises to advance gender equality over the next 5 years, prioritizing direct and flexible funding for feminist movements. So the question is, why feminist movements? The thing is, feminist movements is why we're all here today. It was in 1995 in Beijing that we saw what can really be achieved when feminist movements come together to strategize on a collective vision of justice. They were the driving force behind the adoption of one of the most progressive international agendas in history. And then beyond Beijing and beyond any international forum, feminist movements throughout the world have historically been on the front lines of the most crucial intersecting struggles against the patriarchy, against white supremacism, against neoliberal systems, and remain the backbone of gender justice today. We see that today in all movements throughout the globe, with Maria Verde, with the Me Too movement, with movements that are creating change from the bottom up. And that's why, through this initiative, we're facilitating an intersectional, transformative, inclusive, and transparent accountability process that's entirely co-created and led by feminist movements and grassroots organizations from the Global South. It's indispensable to approach the accountability process for the Generation Equality Forum through the lens of movements. And in order to do that, movements need to be provided the resources to be able to meaningfully engage. So the feminist accountability process, facilitated by Global Fund for Women, aims to honor the legacy of Beijing and the feminist movement building through collective accountability and action by supporting spaces for grassroots organizations to create shared power to push a collective idea of what gender justice should look like. The Generation Equality Forum has brought together governments, private sector, civil society. We've advocated, we've communicated, we've negotiated, and we've ultimately landed on what can only be described as some very promising, but very overwhelming set of commitments. And this set of commitments has the potential to actually catalyze tangible and transformative change for gender equality. But what this potential means is that the real Generation Equality Forum journey is only just beginning. Now is the time to effectively channel this potential in a way that we will see lasting and impactful change for women, girls, and gender marginalized people all over the world. And as history has taught us, our best bet at achieving this is to place feminist movements in the driver's seat. Our aim with this initiative is to work in collaboration with UN Women to provide a multi-focus approach to accountability, complementing each other's works as we go along by engaging the Generation Equality Forum accountability process through grassroots feminist movement lens, so that we can ultimately create a richer outcome. I know we've all heard this statistic ad nauseum at this point, but it doesn't make it any less shocking. Only 1.6% of all funding makes it to girls and women and girls. As a feminist funder and philanthropic advocate, Global Fund for Women recognizes grassroots people power as one of the most effective mechanisms to create and sustain long-term social transformation. This means equipping and putting resources directly in the hands of women and feminist funds and feminist organizations to collectively mobilize and hold accountable Generation Equality Forum commitment makers to achieve a gender just world, which we all deserve to live in. Grassroots organizations in Global South are usually under-resourced and underrepresented in international coalitions and international political forums. Yet they're in the front lines of change and know what their communities need best. From October 2022 to March 2023, we will work with 20 organizations from the Global South, specifically Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean regions to explore the very meaning of feminist accountability. What does it look like to hold power to account in a multi-stakeholder space? How can we engage directly with actors that are being impacted by the process? What tools do we have access to that can help us better understand where we stand and where we want to be? And how can data analysis help us gain the clarity? How can we ensure that our use of data exists in conversation with our vision of justice and transparency? We're very hopeful that we'll find the answers as this accountability process unfolds. But we know for sure the only way to do that is to provide feminist activists and grassroots leaders with the tools to drive the process. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amelia. And Rosa, could we move to you? Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, perfect. So yeah, I mean, could you talk to us a little bit about We Are Purposeful's work with young people, young people's movements, and what you're doing in terms of a complementary feminist accountability process?
Super. So it's great to be here online with you all. I'm Rosa. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Purposeful. And just in brief, Purposeful is a Sierra Leone rooted global hub for girls organizing and activism. We're an explicitly feminist organization. We're committed to shifting resources and power directly to girls and young feminist activists. So I think the first but obvious important thing to say is that when accountability mechanisms are youth-led, they're most likely to be accountable to youth. And when I say accountable, I actually mean accountability in an expansive sense, accountable to young activist-led visions for a world of safety and dignity and freedom, accountability beyond a process and towards a youth-led vision for the world. And on that basis at Purposeful, we're supporting youth-led and centered accountability in the GEF through two main platforms. The first is an ongoing participatory research project to track commitments in GEF to understand where and how those commitments are reaching young activists. And that's both those embedded in the formal processes and also those organizing at the national and the local level. It's still unclear at best how these broad brush commitments are going to reach girls and young women. And without methodologies and platforms through which we track on an ongoing basis, based on their very specific needs, it's really difficult for young people to hold power bearers to account. So secondly, and probably most importantly, young people tell us continuously that they're shut out of funding opportunities at large, and even when funds are purportedly for them. And they're shut out because of their registration status, because they don't have airtime, because funding calls are not in their language, because they can't read or write. And so if we're serious about accountability to young activists, and really especially to adolescent girls, we must start by recognizing the deep infrastructural gap between the resources that have been committed and the mechanisms needed to move those resources to young activists to meet them where they are. And so we've been working with colleagues in the ecosystem, including at Plan and with seed funding from the Irish government to launch the Generation Equality Girls Fund. And this is a participatory fund that lowers or removes the barriers usually faced by young activists in accessing resources. The fund is supporting those connected to the formal process, to unregistered groups, to those without bank accounts, and many are receiving formal funding for the very first time. As a participatory fund, young activists themselves are reviewing applications, they're deciding together how resources are distributed. So the fund's already doing critical work with a cohort of 30 grantee partners, but current resources can only support a tiny fraction of those who have applied. There's so much more to do, and that's why we're particularly excited that a number of private and corporate funders are exploring possibilities to partner through the fund and through mechanisms like those of our sister funders, like the Global Fund for Women. As adult allies, centering girl and young feminist-led accountability means first acknowledging the complexities and the limitations of the current funding ecosystem and building practical, propositional mechanisms that bridge those barriers towards a youth-led vision for this work. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Rosa. I'm not sure that you could hear folks clapping, but there was certainly applause. I think you raised some really important points about exclusion and all the different structures that exclude young people, right? Structures of language, structures of economics, geography, all of these things. And of course, all of those structures intersecting for many young people in many ways that exclude them from really being in the room where decisions get made about their lives and their futures. So I think that was a really important kind of call to action from We Are Purposeful and all of the folks that you work with to really think critically about where the money is going. I think this mic is it like, I don't want to continue with that if it's causing like feedback for everyone. I don't know.
Well, I can hear you fine online.
Okay, great. It's just we can hear a little feedback, which is a little uncomfortable. So is that better? Okay, great. And I think if I'm not mistaken, we're actually moving straight into the next panel, right? UN women folks? Yes, okay. Thank you so much. A round of applause to our three panelists. And I think now we're welcoming representative from the government of Burkina Faso, Mark Suzman, Jan Beagle, Ishanvi Malianil, Ebrard Tuzechan. I think that's the next panel. Okay, I think we can move into the final segment, and we hope to have a really substantive discussion during this panel. We have a really nice diversity of stakeholders here on this panel, and I'll kind of pose questions to each of you as we go. But I'd like to quickly just introduce the panel. We have Dr. Ajami Barry, who's from the government of Burkina Faso, who will be joining us online. One of the Action Coalition leaders working to advance bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. We have Mr. Mark Suzman, the CEO of Gates Foundation, one of the leaders on economic justice and rights, and a long-term generation equality supporter. We have Jan Beagle, who's the Director General of the International Development Law Organization, or as we all know it, IDLO, which has made numerous commitments to support the work of multiple action coalitions. And we're joined by Ishanvi Malianil, an adolescent activist representing young people's voices that have been very critical in fueling innovation and progress at the GEF. And finally, we welcome Ebrard Tuzechan, Social Responsibility and Sustainability Coordinator at Koch Holding, one of the Action Coalition leaders advancing technology and innovation for gender equality. So I really have the same two questions for each of you, and we can, go around and have each of you contribute. I think my first question would really be around, could you speak from your own perspective, your own experience, and what have you at your organization or your, collective, wherever you're located, what are you doing really to implement your commitments to generation equality? And what impact is your work having so far? Ishanvi, maybe we'll start with you.
Hi, can everyone hear me fine? Perfect. Okay. Hi, my name is Ishanvi Malianil, and I currently serve as an adolescent advocate on the Generation Equality Steering Committee. Although we're not a formally registered organization, our work has been extensive, redeeming, and above all, necessary. Myself, among around 20 other adolescent girls globally, have worked for the last few years to mobilize over 1,000 adolescents across 120 countries through global campaigning, awareness raising, intergenerational panels such as this one, girl mentorship, and elevating girl voices and media interviews. Through our efforts, we've oriented adolescent girl priority within the action coalitions.
Sorry, Shani, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I can see the interpreter struggling to keep up.
Yes.
So
I'll slow
just a
down.
reminder
I will
to
slow
slow
down.
down. Thank you.
Okay, we've participated in high-level processes to examine and engage in the Generation Equality Forum closely. And at the intergenerational sessions in Mexico and Paris, 3 members of our committee were leading global adolescent girl voices. Our advocacy efforts promoting an adolescent girl advisory body has accelerated discussion of adolescent representation with the United Nations and its branches as a whole. And our committee has further made formal interventions at Transform Education and during consultings of the UN Youth Office that was just passed with other member states. We also led the Dear World, You Must Listen event at the Young Feminist Unconference in preparation for the Generation Equality Forum in Paris. And our committee members have co-authored portions of UN Women's Youth Newsletter, where we highlight the members of the work of young activists, speak on the importance of feminist self-care, and elevate representational issues which affect us the most. We've also utilized the power of social media to disperse our messaging through quote cards and takeovers to disseminate further and amplify our advocacy work on notable platforms such as the Beijing 25+ Youth Task Force and UN Women's Instagram. However, as a group of adolescents, our foremost priority is education. As such, we are not employed. We have no jobs, no centralized bank account, and no secure set of resources to engage adolescents across technology and oceans. It has most certainly not been a smooth journey. And while COVID-19 plagued the world, a second, more pervasive virus weeded our institutions, a lack of attention. Among our committee and those we've mobilized, we faced incremental difficulties retaining involvement. We watched as girls slip through the cracks as COVID defined as attention to our issues waned. Many of us did not feel seen nor heard. And in a digital world, we harbored complications in contacting girls, rural girls who lack the technological infrastructure to participate. Girls often skipped classes to join mobilization events and strategies, and our education became seen as an obstacle, not a tool for us. Moving forward, the resources must be allocated so girls do not have to compromise their academic success to earn a simple right to representation and inclusion. By 2026, a goal that we seek to adopt and strongly urge commitment makers to do so as well is eliminating barriers to inclusion. Every adolescent girl is entitled to equal and just incorporation in the generation equality processes. And our next steps is prioritizing our worldview by including us in every single step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanvi. Dr. Euphrasie Ajami-Barry, we have you online, and I'd like to pose the same question to you. Dr. Barry is representing the government of Burkina Faso today. Dr. Barry, could you speak to your commitments and what impact you're seeing in your context?
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour l'intérêt porté à notre projet régional. Je suis du Burkina Faso et je représente 6 pays, le Burkina donc, le Bénin, la Guinée-Conakry, le Mali, le Niger et le Togo. Il faut dire que nous avons pris 8 engagements régionaux communs qui étaient basés sur les grandes lignes de notre coalition d'action. Nous faisons un plaidoyer pour associer le Sénégal, la Côte d'Ivoire, la Mauritanie et bien d'autres pays, pourquoi pas. Alors, nous avons 2 grands types d'actions. J'ai le sourire quand je parle de nos actions, nous en sommes très fiers. Dans un premier temps, ce sont les actions au niveau régional. Nous avons donc, à partir des 8 engagements, créé des comités techniques au niveau de chaque pays pour la mise en œuvre de nos engagements. Et bien sûr, nous avons également créé un comité technique régional d'organisation et de suivi des engagements pris au cours du forum. Il faut dire aussi que nous avons élaboré une feuille de route régionale de mise en œuvre des engagements Et les différents plans de mise en œuvre de ces engagements-là au niveau pays, au niveau de chaque pays, sont en cours d'élaboration et nous espérons entrer en position de ces livrables-là au mois d'octobre, d'ici la fin du mois d'octobre. Au niveau de chaque pays, bien sûr, il y a aussi de grandes avancées. Nous avons le processus d'élaboration d'un document national de l'éducation complète à la sexualité. Au Burkina Faso, nous avons élaboré le référentiel national de l'éducation à la vie familiale, comme nous l'appelons. Nous avons élaboré également le guide d'utilisation et des fiches éducatives. Au Mali, pareil, ils sont dans le processus d'éducation à la vie familiale. Au Togo, c'est l'éducation aux valeurs et à la santé sexuelle. Au Niger, c'est l'éducation en santé reproductive des adolescents et jeunes. En Guinée, c'est l'éducation complète à la sexualité. Vous voyez que dans tous ces pays-là, nous sommes vraiment en pleine évolution. Il faut dire également que nous sommes dans l'élaboration des textes d'application de la loi sur la santé de la reproduction et pour certains pays, ils sont à la relecture de cette loi. Les différents référentiels nationaux seront harmonisés et conformes au protocole de Maputo. Vous nous avez demandé quel est l'impact à ce jour. C'est vraiment l'implémentation de l'éducation à la vie familiale. Toute notre jeunesse a besoin d'être suivie. Nous avons besoin d'échanger, de dialogue intergénérationnel. C'est vraiment nos pays, la finalisation de plans nationaux de planification familiale pour ceux dont c'est échu et pour ceux qui sont en cours. Nous avons également l'élaboration, et nous en sommes très fiers, de notre projet régional du Forum Génération Égalité. En termes de finances, nous avons des ressources intermédiaires avec plusieurs partenaires qui ont contribué à la mise en œuvre de nos activités, mais nous comptons vraiment sur l'élaboration de notre plan régional qui sera budgétisé, qui sera pour nous un instrument de plaidoyer. Vous nous verrez donc sur plusieurs plateformes avec notre plan régional. Et il faut dire qu'au Burkina, comme dans les autres pays, c'est vraiment un travail avec les partenaires techniques et financiers, les organisations de la société civile, la partie gouvernementale, plusieurs ministères, tous ces partenaires-là à qui vraiment je dis un grand merci et vraiment je vous remercie pour cette première question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jami Barry, joining us online, representing the government of Burkina Faso.
Okay. Je vous en prie.
Okay, so I've been told that we have to sort of hit pause on this a little bit because we do actually have representatives from the governments of Liberia and Finland. And I think they would like to make some remarks. Yes, it was in the program before, then it was taken out, and I think they're here now, so. A warm welcome to Johanna Sumoveri, the State Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to Finland, and also I think Her Excellency Saidi Tar of the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection of Liberia. And we'd like to welcome you today. Thanks for dropping in to make a few remarks on the importance of the generation equality journey. Perhaps Her Excellency Saidi Tar, could we start with you?
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for having me here. I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Liberia. Excellencies, we're very happy to be a part of this. Liberia made 2 commitments and to the actual coalitions of gender-based violence and economic justice and rights. We have a 3 years time frame where we're looking at allocating $8 million, $6 million towards fighting XGBV, and of course, 2 million towards making sure that we are looking at economic empowerment of women and girls. We're very happy that we have support from the UN system, especially through the EU-funded Spotlight Initiative and all of our other donors, and especially our friends from Sweden who want to mention that too, because we've been doing a lot of work around SGBV. We've made internal and external commitments. Externally, we remain committed to joining leaders and strengthening collaboration with the 2 action coalitions. And that is also working with member states, international organizations, United Nations agencies, traditional leaders. That's very important for us, our civil society organizations, philanthropies, youth-led organizations, and also the private sector. We continue to leverage on existing partnerships. Again, you know, like I said, the EU, UN Women, the World Health Organization, Sweden, and of course, all of our other UN partners. As committed, we are addressing gender-based violence, harmful traditional practices, adolescent girls, sexual and reproductive health and rights. We have produced a gender equality profile, which helps us see where men and women are, and something, you know, different in Liberia now, so that we have that information to go by. The comprehensive prevention strategy and the social and behavioral change communication strategy, because that's very important in the work that we're doing. And that is being rolled out at all levels. We also been mandated by the president himself, who is our feminist in chief, by way of, you know, just his own belief in what he has to do, to ensure that every single ministry, agency, commission, government-wide has a gender and social inclusion unit, so that we are looking through, at everything through the gender lens. We have also gender responsive budgeting going on and all of that. We've established to date a 24-hour call center, never before in Liberia. We've been able to get 3 DNA machines, 1 bought by the government of Liberia and 2 through the UN implemented EU Spotlight Initiative. We've been working directly with our traditional leaders as regards FGM, because we also believe that we have to do this through country context to ensure that when we do eradicate FGM, it is eradicated from the root and not just from the surface. So we're very strong in working with our traditional elders. So far, we've been able to work with them so that this year we went ahead and signed a commitment with traditional elders where they themselves committed to stopping all activities from the Sandy Bush for 3 years. There's a moratorium. And we're hoping that within these 3 years, we're working through legislation, everything we have to do in order to eradicate FGM. But one of the other things that have come out of that is that we had to be able to replace what we're taking, which is the harmful part of the traditional practice. And that is something that was tied to economics. So of course, through the Spotlight Initiative, we're building alternative learning centers where people will be able to still continue the good parts of the traditional practice while eradicating the harmful part. In addition, we've been supported by the World Bank, of course, with the social cash programs, but we also are very happy we have a social registry, which also says where the poorest of the poor are and where we can find women, where we can find children and the vulnerable population. And this will help the government as the agenda goes by to see where they need to take care of their people. We've been able to secure $44.6 million from the World Bank. And this is something that's very, very important for us because this is going towards the Liberian women empowerment project. This is something that's going to be different. It's not regular, just farming and all of that, but it's going to be inclusive of VSLAs, inclusive of innovations and all of that. So we're very happy for that. And then lastly, you know, we just want to be sure that we appreciate in Sweden because we are right now on working together, the Ministry of Gender and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on how we can really commit to ensuring that within the next year or so, we can introduce ourselves as one of the governments that will be adopting the feminist foreign policy. So we're very happy for that. So for our internal commitments, we have our anti-SGBV roadmap, and that is something that is inclusive of ourselves, the international community, local actors, and so we're fighting gender-based violence together in a different way because we look at the what else, how else we can do that, and so we've been working with that, and we've been able to ensure we bought vehicles and motorbikes and things that we needed to go into the communities to ensure that the fight is really brought to the community, and that we're also ensuring that people see that we have a task force because now we've established a gender task force. We are on track to ensure we have a special prosecutor on rape and also the sexual crimes registry. So this is what we're doing right now. And the president has mandated that we do have this. So far, we've committed, or we've been able to use $2 million of the 6 million. And we're fighting everything we can do to make sure we get the balance of the money. Because this, I think that one of the greatest things we've been able to do was this anti-HB roadmap, because it's really been a huge difference in the way we fight with everybody working together. So again, thank you. And we continue to work with our Action Coalition leaders to ensure that we can establish this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Her Excellency Saidi Tar. I think that was a really comprehensive and really inspiring kind of range of things that you're doing all across the spectrum to really address issues at the root. And I think that's always a really kind of admirable approach for states to take. And with that, Johanna, could we move over to you, and could you make some similar remarks about what Finland's doing, what your role in GEF has been, and how you're taking your commitments forward?
Thank you very much, and I'm so happy to be here. This completes my UNGA week, which has been very hectic, and I was happy that it's exactly this event, because I always want to talk about equality, and it's something that we in Finland it's something that we take really seriously. And it was good to hear about feminist foreign policy. My minister is actually organizing in November nationally conference on how to advance gender equality in foreign policy, and what the concept of feminist foreign policy contains now, when so many countries have stepped in and are kind of trying to think what it means in practice. So I think it's very good to learn from each other in that way. And so we are doing lots of work in Finland. We have actually human rights-based foreign and security policy, and that also of course includes gender equality, and it also figures in our white paper on for foreign and security policy. So yes, and this technology theme is also a theme of our foreign policy influencing, and how technology, what kind of equality implications technology brings to us. And we have to take a note that there's lots of progress also being made, but we have to be proud of those achievements, but we also have to be really vigilant as to what there is still to do. In specifically generation equality, Finland is a co-leader in the Action Coalition for Technology and Innovation for Gender Equality. And we are committed to the highest level of accountability, both as an Action Coalition leader and as a commitment maker ourselves. And technological divide, it has become the new phase of gender inequality. And we want to make sure that all women and girls can enjoy digital opportunities in full. Finland wants to be at the forefront of this work, and we are committed to promoting the rights of all women and girls in all sectors of the society. And we employ intersectional approach, and it must be also at the center of all our work. In 2029, so last year, we allocated 17 million euros to the intersection of technology, innovation, and gender equality in its development cooperation to execute our commitments. And this funding is used, for example, to improve digital safety of women human rights defenders. We've been stressing a lot how much we have to support human rights defenders in general, but especially women human rights defenders who are in the most vulnerable situation. So that's something we have also done. And then also we are promoting digital literacy of women and girls. And we also look forward to the next year's CSV, so Commission on the Status of Women, because it has also a focus on technology, in intersection of technology, innovation, and gender equality. So we are really looking forward to next year's CSW, and you can count on our support and leadership in this team. Tracking progress and measuring effectiveness is vital to make change happen, and this must be at the core of generation equality. But however, accountability reports are not of intrinsic value. They must serve the purpose of guiding us forward to result in concrete recommendation on how to improve our effectiveness. And we must be also very transparent in our work for gender equality. to learn from both of the successes we have been made, but also from the setbacks, because there are setbacks. And especially at this moment, we have to be working really hard, because the pushback in gender equality has been very depressing. It happens everywhere. It happens also in some countries that you think that it wouldn't happen. There are those tides that we have to counter, and it's depressing, but we cannot be cynical. We have to continue on working together, and only together we can be effective, as effective as possible. One of the generation equality's biggest strengths is it's built in multi-stakeholder approach. We can engage different sectors. We can engage private sector, academia, decision makers, civil society. So we have to have everyone on board on this, because not only the governments are the ones who have power or influence to change things. We need everyone on board. And I think that committed and ambitious gender champions from all parts of the society are crucial in the world where we are experiencing increasing level of pushback towards human rights and gender equality. So let us celebrate all the progress that we have made. Thank you for everyone in this room, everyone behind this table, for all the work you have done, and we have to celebrate, but not forget that there is still a long way to go, and we must aim for significant results and accelerated development. But above all, we also have to work for the highest level of accountability. So with these words, I call you all in to join the work, and I think we are already here in this room on board, everyone. But yes, you can count on Finland on being active in this matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those remarks. And I think also really for the sobering reminder of the fact that anti-gender and anti-democracy movements are gaining ground. And also that there is an urgent need for the protection of WHRDs and HRDs everywhere. And I think those, some really important points came out of both your interventions about, structural change, as well as the kind of opposition that awaits us out there. So, all the more reason for really collective strength and collective efforts. Thank you so much for being with us. Are you going to stay with us, or? Okay, thank you.
I need to run for the airport, actually. So we're heading back to Helsinki.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. All right, thank you. And I'll just bring us back to our panel. Just a quick reminder and a recap. We were talking to all these different stakeholders on this wonderful panel about what kind of commitments they've made and what they're doing about those commitments, importantly, and of course, what kind of impact they're seeing. Jan, could we turn to you? Jan is the Director General of the IDLO. And we understand that you've made commitments not just in one, but across action coalitions, which I think is a really important approach. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, well, lovely to be here. And we've very nice to be here. And yes, we really think it's important to have a holistic approach to this issue. And we're pleased to contribute to the work of 4 coalitions: the Gender-Based Violence, Economic Justice and Rights, the Feminist Action for Climate Justice, and the Feminist Movements and Leadership. And we've also joined UN Women and other partners in 2 collective commitments on gender responsive policing and essential services for women and girls subject to violence. And obviously, as our mandate is exclusively devoted to promoting the rule of law to advance peace and sustainable development, obviously our approach to engagement with gender equality, generation equality, is really supporting a rule of law approach across the board to women's empowerment and gender equality. And we all know that women and girls in all societies see a persistent disparity between, if you like, the laws on the books and the laws on the streets, and the big difference between what people experience in their lives and the promise of justice. And clearly in recent times, the pandemic and conflicts and COVID and climate change have really set back efforts to close that justice gap. So we've put a number of targeted interventions to address our commitments, particularly around eliminating discriminatory laws and practices, increasing access for women and girls to formal and informal justice system, strengthening capacity of all parts of the justice chain and civil society with a particular focus on women and girls, and supporting the equal participation of women in the justice sector. I just want to give you a couple of examples of the impact in the past year in two of these areas, gender-based violence and climate justice. With gender-based violence, we're looking at it, as we always do, top down with institutions, and then bottom up with civil society. So we're looking at how we can strengthen legislation, how we can strengthen investigation and prosecution of GBV offences, but we're also looking at a better support service for survivors. So right now we're looking at legislation in a number of countries, and we're also, for example, and this is a concrete example I would give you, working in Somalia, for example, with multiple stakeholders, including traditional tribal leaders. So I was interested in what the minister said from Liberia around standardizing alternative resolution processes, because this is where the overwhelming majority of people and the overwhelming majority of women get their justice, to ensure that they do adhere to international standards and they don't discriminate against women and girls. And last year in 2021, nearly half of the 2,000 cases that were brought in these alternative dispute resolution centers were brought by women, and we also trained women paralegals to support those women in putting their cases. And then in the area of climate justice, again, the unequally gendered impact of climate change is, I would say, increasingly being recognized, but there's a real global policy gap in addressing that climate gender nexus. And we see that discriminatory laws and practices mean that women and girls are less able to protect themselves. They lose access to land and resources, and they also face higher rates of gender-based violence during climate-related crises. So we're making the case for an explicitly feminist approach to put women's rights and gender equality at the center of the climate discourse. And again, a top-down approach to strengthen legal and regulatory frameworks and build institutional capacity, and a bottom-up approach to empower women and girls to realize their environmental rights, which we are doing right now in a number of countries. And the results of those pilots, we believe, can be used to scale up this work across multiple countries. Well, I'll stop there.
Wow. I think it's just really impressive to hear about a few critical things that I kind of just, that struck me. One is, I think, participation in justice processes. And I love that you're focusing on that. And, of course, because institutional strengthening, et cetera, is important, but it's not going to matter if people don't feel strengthened to actually participate in those processes and to be, again, in the decision-making spaces. And of course, the fact that you're also really strengthening and exploring survivor-centered approaches, which can mean a lot of different things and a lot of non-traditional legal approaches sometimes. With that, could we move to you, Ebrard, next to tell us a little bit about Koch Holdings commitments and what that's looking like 1 year on?
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here in this discussion with you and women and esteemed panelists. Let me first briefly introduce Koch Holding to set the scene. We are a company almost 100 years old now. We are based in Turkey, but we have international operations. We are exporting to 150 countries. We have over 100,000 employees. Our combined revenues make around 8% of Turkey's GDP, equivalent to 8% of Turkey's GDP, and our R&D investments make up around 7% of all R&D investment in Turkey. Digital transformation, innovation, and gender equality are intersecting priority areas for us and part of our cultural transformation journey. We acknowledge the tremendous work under Action Coalition on Technology and Innovation, and we are proud to be one of the leaders in that coalition. We have 3 commitments. The first one is mobilizing our group companies to give specific tangible targets. This year, 8 of our group companies became global commitment makers. These companies are in different sectors: energy, automotive, consumer durables, and finance. As you can imagine, these are all male-dominated sectors, and our companies committed to reach at least 30% women in R&D, innovation, digital transformation jobs. For some of our companies, this is almost doubling their current ratios in 5 years' time. Of course, in order to reach these targets, we are aware that we need to create pathways between school and work. We need to develop ecosystems where girls can have access to mentors, to role models. To that end, our companies initiated 30 different programs to reach out to 500,000 girls throughout Turkey. This includes specific internships, mentorship programs, scholarships, and programs to attract girls to STEM education. So this is our first commitment. Our second commitment is transform our R&D and innovation processes with a gender focus. We are working closely with UN Women and IDEO. We are now piloting the Gender Transformative Innovation Guide with our innovation leaders in our companies. And our last and third commitment is to support women innovators in Turkey in our greater ecosystem. We launched a program together with UNDP and Koç University. We are supporting women-led startups in technology. And this has also started, and we have already supported 10 startups with women leaders. As a final remark, I can say that our strong relationship with both UN Women and UN agencies is our greatest asset, and we look forward to create models together and disseminate them both in our country, regionally, and of course globally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Ebrard talking really, I think, about your focus on innovation and supporting innovators, which I think is incredibly important. Mark, we'll come to you last. And maybe you could again tell us about Gates Foundation commitments, but also your support to the process and what impact has looked like at your end.
Well, thank you, and thank you to everyone, actually, to UN Women, to all the panelists who've participated today, to everyone who's online watching, because this really is a moment of reflection, but also celebration, because it's a celebration of an understanding of what we hoped when at the Gates Foundation with others, we were very early supporters of the process that became the run-up to the Generation Equality Forum and the funding of the action coalitions and all the other steps, because we believed the world needed a moment that understood, reflected, translated the fact that SDG 5 is in many ways the most transformative, highest leverage SDG, because it's the one that so many others depend on. You simply cannot meet the poverty goal, you cannot meet the health goals, you cannot meet the education goals, and of course the core of SDG 5 at its heart is about gender equality and the Generation Equality Forum. And so trying to take that and turn it into concrete commitments in action, which is what we heard from Papa and his team and documented, is also what was going to make generation equality different from so many other things. It's not just about statements, as many people have said. We've heard many, many times statements of support. Jan just talked about how there are many laws on the books that are not observed and taken action. And so this linkage of measurement and commitment and pulling together coalitions, and it's been very inspiring to listen to what Coach Holdings is doing, what's happening in countries like Liberia, the very detailed specificity around that. And so just at a general level, as a sort of broader supporter of the process, I wanted to say how excited we are to see how this is moving forward. With specific regard to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's own commitments, the commitments that we made, Melinda French Gates, our co-chair, made at Paris last year, it was actually the single largest announcement we made in any area. It was a $2.1 billion commitment to support economic justice and rights, SRHR, and feminist movements and leadership. It was a big step for our foundation because it also represented for us a whole of foundation approach. For us and for me as CEO, driving and taking the message that gender equality is fundamental to all of our work, even work that we historically might have thought of as very technical around bits of malaria prevention or tuberculosis or some of our health things. We found that when you have gender intentionality, gender targeting, gender focus, you get very different outcomes. And so having this set of commitments combined with what then also was the launch of a gender equality division at the foundation and my own personal emphasis, and from Bill and Melinda French Gates as well, gender equality is core to everything we do. And when spending those commitments just in the past year, what we've tried to do as examples is to make sure that what we're doing is catalytic, that is bringing in and leveraging partnerships. So let me give you just one example, which was as part of our commitment to the Economic Justice and Rights Action Coalition, we committed $10 million to support the care economy. Now, that's a significant amount of money, but it doesn't do very much on its own. So through the Action Coalition, using the partners and networks, we were able to work with a range of advocates who've been working to elevate the issue for years, work with governments like Germany, who elevated the care issue as part of their G7 summit, gave far greater weight and political visibility. And that in turn then led to our funds combining with other partners to spur the creation of a brand new, the first time ever, global childcare initiative of the World Bank, which is catalyzing $180 million in new funding over the next 5 years from the bank, governments, philanthropic partners to support childcare in low and middle income countries. That's the kind of action and transformative power of multiplying the networks and effects that we hope to do across all the areas we work. And we've been doing it through other spin-offs that have come from the Action Coalition, like the Global Alliance on Care, and also bringing in and crowding in a range of philanthropic partners, including, Sima mentioned today, the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, but many others. So there are other examples, but I just use that as a case study. You've heard great ones, but it's why we're so proud to be part of this coalition at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, why we're fully committed to the goals of the Generation Equality Forum and to counting and the accountability and the measurement and the metrics that make sure we deliver on those promises. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark Sussman from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that brings this wonderful conversation to a close. And, you know, just to kind of wrap up or leave some questions or to provoke more conversation as you leave this room, you know, a lot is being achieved, and we know that, but there's a long way more to go. And I think a really important part of achieving that, the more to go, is really remaining committed to transparency and to accountability. And, you know, that brings us back to Madam Executive Director's appeal to report more. You know, only 31% commitments are being reported on, we heard. So yeah, I mean, I, for one, am very excited to see what more of that is actually going to look like. I think I was also very excited to kind of hear the data about the fact that a lot of commitments are actually joint commitments and are new partnerships that have actually been seeded because of this process. Because we know that collective efforts are needed to strengthen the rights of women and young people and structurally excluded people everywhere, and to advance gender equality, and more importantly, to strengthen and resource feminist movements who are really doing the work of advancing the vision that we all share for our world. And I think, you know, to really achieve that lasting change, to use your words, Emilia, that will last well beyond our lifetimes. So I hope we all leave here excited, inspired, and all the more committed to this work and to the principle of accountability and collective accountability as well. Thanks, everyone.
second part. But yeah, no, but I think that must be.